Research began on infants and their attachment styles. Other researchers carried it forward to how these attachment styles that we acquire play out in our work relationships, our romantic relationships, our friendships, because they do.
It's like that tug of war. One tries to pull the other one towards them because of that feeling of fear of abandonment, and the other one tends to be more avoidant and push people away for that same reason.
Welcome back to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Beth Gustin, a licensed professional counselor here in Colorado, and I'm with my co-host, Robin Ennis, a licensed clinical social worker, also here in Colorado. We received a question from a listener regarding the link between being born premature and attachment styles, and the question was, is there a link? If I remember the question correctly. And the short answer is, research has shown that yes, there is a link between being born prematurely and having what researchers call an insecure attachment style versus a secure attachment style. And we will go into what the different types of attachment styles are, because there are technically 3 under insecure and 1 under secure, and talk a bit about that and why a person who is born premature might have an insecure attachment style.
Yes, this is a really great topic in terms of attachment style, because if you think about it, who do we learn from the very beginning, from inception? Who do we learn and model love off of? That nurturing type of caring environment. We learn that from our parent, our caregivers, the people around us. You know, it's very fitting to talk about it, especially as we start to get older and we start to develop our relationships, whether it's platonic or romantic relationships. The way that we interpret emotional safety and loving safety when we're younger, that translates into how we interact with other people as an adult.
Yes, and if you're looking for a book to read, there is a book called Attached by Rachel Heller, and I'm going to forget the other person's last name, Diane something. And it is on, I'm reading it on Bookshare, but I think it's on Audible as well. It's really helpful when talking about dating and romantic relationships and attachment styles, because research began way back in the 40s or 50s on infants and their attachment styles. And then other researchers over time have carried it forward to how these attachment styles that we acquire play out in our work relationships, our romantic relationships, our friendships, because they do. And you can change your attachment style. It takes a lot of work, but you can change it. So very quickly, as I said earlier, there are 3 types of attachment styles under insecure. There's anxious, avoidant, and a rare small percentage of the population can have anxious avoidant, or also called disorganized. Some also call the anxious attachment style as preoccupied. So anxious, avoidant, and then anxious avoidant or disorganized, same thing. And then secure basically is just like what it sounds. You have a secure attachment style. You tend to not overanalyze things if things in relationships don't go well, or there's minor hiccups and things like that. And you're able to have closeness and intimacy and a warm, healthy, loving relationship. And so those are the attachment styles in a very small nutshell.
In that book, Beth, that you suggested, do they have a quiz or any type of questions for people to find out their attachment style? Oh, good. Okay.
They do. There's a quiz for yourself and a quiz you can take to try and determine your partner's attachment style too, which I think is interesting. And then if you want to do more research online, there's other attachment quizzes that you and or couples can take.
Yeah, that's what I was going to recommend. And I've recommended this to clients as online ones, but I like, Beth, how you said in that book that it has one for your partner too. And of course, the online ones, your partner can take it as well. But I think it's just easier if it's in one place in a book. Yeah, your attachment style and your partner's attachment style, whatever one you each have, and that can impact the dynamic in the communication. So if one is anxious attachment and then avoidant attachment, it's like that tug of war. One tries to pull the other one towards them because of that feeling of fear of abandonment, and the other one tends to be more avoidant and push people away for that same reason, the fear of abandonment.
Which I think is a great segue to being born premature and attachment styles. Because if we think about when we're born premature, we typically spend, I say we because I was born premature, about 3.5 months early for me, and was a long time ago because I'm getting older as time goes on, but babies were placed in incubators or isolates and often could not be held by their parents initially because they had to be in incubators and oxygenated environments. And so, from what I understand, you can touch the babies through those, but you can't hold them for long periods of time anyway. And there's also a whole lot of birth trauma that can come with being born prematurely. And so it would then naturally make sense, in my opinion, and the research does support this, that some premature babies can have an anxious attachment style. They can be avoidant too, but typically we see more anxious because we develop an anxious attachment style when sometimes our needs are met, sometimes they're not, or they're met kind of late. And so the baby will try to self-soothe for a while because needs are not being met. And some babies have a very hard time self-soothing, especially when we're newborns. And if we have needs and they're not met quickly, that can lead to anxiety. Or if they're sometimes met and sometimes not met at all, that can lead to anxiety. Versus someone might develop an avoidant attachment style if their needs were met with harshness or dismissiveness or not met at all. That person's going to, over time, as they grow up, learn to become very self-reliant and independent and have a hard time letting other people in. Whereas, as Robin said very eloquently, the anxious person is going to have this kind of push-pull dynamic because anxious people tend to overanalyze and take small things more personally, even if it isn't about them, because of that fear of abandonment. And so they will become more clingy, whereas people that are more avoidant will be obviously more avoidant and more distant.
Right. And whatever attachment style you have, they say that the first 2 months of a newborn's life is very critical in terms of attachment and bonding. And that's where a baby really learns how to be secure with their caretaker. And that's why they say there's also not to digress, but there's the adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and there's 9 of them. That's why they say, again, the first 2 months is crucial in helping a child's development, because if a child doesn't feel secure, has that level of trauma that Beth mentioned, it can increase their chances for having more adverse childhood experiences, which can increase their chances of different physical and mental health conditions along the way. But I do like, Beth, how you mentioned, and we'll talk more about this, is that whatever attachment style you have as a child, as you get older and you start to develop your own ways of thinking, or even starting to get therapy, if that's the route for you, then you can start to change that attachment style pattern, especially if it's causing you a lot more harm than good.
Absolutely. And I think you think about someone who's anxious, if they get reassurance initially, they become less anxious and they can be more secure. If we can learn to self-regulate and self-soothe and kind of help ourselves reduce our anxiety, we'll become more secure. I think you can definitely change an avoidant attachment style too, but I believe that takes a bit more work because you have to learn to trust other people. And that can be really hard to do, but it can be done. I think as we can learn to develop a sense of safety and trust in those who are closest to us, we can become more secure and thus become more securely attached if we have a partner.
Right. It does take a lot longer with avoidant. I like to use cognitive behavioral therapy, and you have to be repetitive with it. Okay, so is this fact or fiction that you're thinking about this person? How has this person shown you that you can't trust them? And a lot of instances, some clients will say, well, but they haven't shown me that. And they're really going off of past hurts and past experiences. And so really trying to keep a person present and in the moment. And in life is precarious. Sure, we don't know what will happen. It is a risk developing relationships with people because it can cause hurt. But I believe that it's the reward is worth it versus the risk. And so it's just trying to process that chance of getting hurt, but also to understanding, okay, if I don't put myself out there, it's still in a way hurting me, but just on a different level.
I also use cognitive behavioral therapy to help with this, and we can use EMDR as well to help with some of the past trauma aspects of this as well. And there's actually EMDR protocols for birth trauma, in utero trauma, nonverbal or preverbal trauma that can be helpful as well from that perspective. I think it's also important to start small when you are trying to build up your comfort level with trusting others. So setting yourself up for success. So trying to put yourself in situations where you've got a pretty darn good chance that the outcome is going to be favorable, so you can build up those instances of building trust and relying on others. And then increasingly putting yourself out there more out of your comfort zone over time to help hopefully build up that security.
Yep, I agree with that. Start small and then gradually work up. That way your system won't have a shock, to it. And it becomes natural and innate over time versus you feeling like you're throwing yourself in the unknown all at once.
I think the same is true when we're working on reducing anxiety too, to help change the anxious attachment style to more secure. It is about exposing ourselves to situations that might induce a small amount of anxiety over time, and then again getting out of our comfort zone to increasing that anxiety as we build up coping skills to help cope with our anxiety. And so with clients, I always try to build a pretty good solid toolbox of resources and tools they can draw from before we start looking at, I guess you call it exposure therapy, where we talk about it and expose someone to just thinking about these things and work on tolerating the anxiety and helping clients realize, hey, this isn't as bad as I think it's going to be or thought it would be. So I know we just touched kind of on the surface of attachment styles and how a person can go about changing them and why someone born premature might experience or develop one of these insecure attachment styles, but I hope this covers the question. If not, please reach out to us. As always, we like hearing from anyone who would like to reach out to us with feedback, comments, questions.
I just want to quickly add is that whenever you're thinking about attachment styles or anxiety, just remember that there's nothing wrong with you. I know that the brain tends to go, something's wrong with you or whatever the trajectory may be in your head, but it's just putting a name to what you're experiencing. So just continue to be gentle with yourself.
Some of the attachment styles might get more of a bad rap than others, and there's no comparison here. And we have no control over our birth circumstances and how we were raised as infants and toddlers and young children. And so be compassionate with yourselves. Like Robin said, be gentle. And if you don't like your attachment style, work on changing it.
Yep. Remember, you have the control over your life. It's what you are responsible for and what you are accountable for. That's what you can control in this moment.
And until next time, please take care and stay grounded.
Until next time, take care.
Oh yeah, Wellness Wednesday with Beth and Robin. Gonna settle it down. Oh yeah, get your feet planted on the ground.
For more podcasts with the blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to leave us some feedback, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
Wellness and taking care of ourselves. It's all about you and taking care of yourself. Oh
yeah. When we share
what we see through
each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the reality
of blind abilities.